Hello everyone. Today I want to take a look at the new Tales of Berseria demo. There will be no spoilers contained in this review at all, so please feel free to continue watching if you're afraid of spoilers. I'm not even going to talk about the whole censored scene incident either. And if you want to get into the Tales of series and you don't know what the series is about specifically, I think that this video would be very helpful for you. The game actually seems very well polished. In the demo, we get access to two areas. You get to see some beaches and shores, and you also get to see a pretty nasty looking forest. This game feels like the other games in the modern era of Tales of games. What I mean by that is that it feels like it's going to be similar to Berseria and Berseria. From these, we don't actually see any dungeons specifically, but we see some open world areas. It has a lot of areas that you can explore within the map, and you can also get collectibles. In this game specifically, you can get collectibles to open special kinds of chests. Like Berseria, I would assume that the dungeons themselves are very simple and don't have very tricky puzzles in it at all. Some people would argue that the puzzle dungeons that you used to see in Symphonia and Abyss were too difficult for people to handle. And I would actually kind of agree with that. One would safely assume, like the modern Tales of games, that there will be no overworld in this game. Most likely, the map will just be a network of open world maps that are connected to each other with a few towns spread in between. Tales of games are very famous for their skits, where characters will talk to each other. Those kind of skits are fully voiced with 2D portraits. They're unique to the series because you don't see it in other games. Usually the big game titles will show character interactions exclusively through 3D cutscenes. But because these skits are actually made in 2D, there are generally a lot of them in these kinds of games. Sometimes there are over 100 or 200 skits for the previous Tales of games. In this demo, we noticed that the skits are actually longer than usual. In the old games, you'd get a lot of skits that would be under, let's say, 10 lines. The first skit that we're shown in this demo might have been for 30 to 40 lines or even more than that of spoken dialogue. It's worth noting that this seems to be a storyline skit. Although it's not specifically labeled as such, it seems that this skit is actually one that they purposely wanted to show off for their demo. So maybe these skits that we were actually shown might be more detailed than the ones we see in the game because they wanted to choose some of the best ones specifically to show off in this demo. But you know, these skits, they're actually really funny and they have really funny character interactions. With this game, it actually looks like the not completely full body skits like the Berseria game. These skits actually only go up to the character's torso. So it's actually more like Legendia's skits, if you've played that title. These character designs, these character portraits that they've designed for the skits, they're definitely better than the heads-only portraits you used to see in the old games like Symphonia. The combat system looks really crazy, but it's actually pretty simple once you understand the mechanics. And there will definitely be a tutorial in the game like in the demo. A comparison can be made between this game and the Tales of Graces in terms of the combat system. Basically, you have a number of moves that your character can perform on the action field. When you run out of a number of moves you can perform, you need to recharge it, and then you can perform more battle moves, designated by a kind of spirit bar. In Berseria, you were actually extremely limited in which party members you could use during battle. There was actually a very poor decision made. They actually had two mandatory characters that you had to use, and then for the other two remaining characters, you could choose whichever ones you wanted, and you could swap those ones in and out, but you had two fixed characters that a lot of people didn't like to use. From this demo, it actually looks like they've made changes to the battle system, such that you can switch in and out any party member anytime in any battle on the fly. That's definitely one case where the developers were clearly listening to the customer complaints. I'd like to talk a little bit about the equipment system. When you go through it, it looks like there are lots and lots of sub-menus. Like Berseria, I feel like with all of the equipment that's possible, the customization options are a little bit bloated for my taste. I really don't think they needed to have so many types of equipment that each have different levels and status effects and all of that. if you played through Berseria, you'd know that the combat system was actually pretty simple, but the equipment options were really, really awful and bloated, and you could spend so much time just giving equipment to your characters, but I don't say that in a good way. This seems like it's going to be a problem in Berseria, unfortunately, but the good news is that the game itself, usually the gameplay in the more recent Tales of games isn't very difficult. It'll probably have many difficulty options you can choose from too, so you can actually pick an easier difficulty setting if you don't want to go through all of this customization hassle. In terms of the sounds get really chaotic when you're in a battle, and like the other Tales of games, you have the whole blah 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 issue when you're in really heated battles. Like, you can barely hear sometimes the battle music because you'll hear so many character voices who are each shouting out the special move that they're doing. It's silly. But outside of battle, the music is actually really good. It's actually going to be similar to Xillia and Berseria's soundtracks. And, they actually have pretty good quality music. One thing I hated about the previous game was that sometimes it would take a while to traverse across the map. In the demo, they actually show off a hoverboard that you can use to get around quite quickly. It'll probably only be unlocked after a certain plot point in the actual game. But this actually seems like a very good item to have. Let's say that you missed some collectibles on one edge of the map. You can go through the map really quickly to just pick that item up. That was a big problem. In Berseria, you'd be spending so much time just running in a line to try to get what you want to find. I'll also comment a bit on the enemy types. Like the other Tales of games, this game will recycle some of the enemy types that we've seen before. Some of the enemy types that we see in the demo include the tree ant enemies, the snake enemies, and the big rocky elemental enemies. We've seen these all before, and they're a staple of the series. We can assume there's probably going to be a few new enemy types as well. In terms of the storyline, and if you don't know this, the Tales of games are usually independent of each other. You don't need to play one game to understand another, usually. This game is actually a prequel to Berseria, but it's a prequel that's actually hundreds, if not 1,000 years or so, beforehand. There are references to Berseria that you can actually see right off the bat in the demo, such as one character actually being a sibling to another character that you meet in Berseria. But for the most part, I think that you can play this one without playing the other games, Berseria. If you want to catch all of the references, though, you might as well go ahead and play Berseria. You can actually probably get it for a very cheap price now. I think that this game, when it releases, it's going to be a very decent game, but I also think it's going to be similar to Berseria, but without Berseria's mistakes. You can see that the developers have clearly taken initiative to improve the flaws found within the battle system. Otherwise, the graphics and the sound, they're pretty much similar to what you've seen before. I think that it's going to be worth a playthrough when it comes out, though. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel so that you can be the first to see all of my latest videos. Check out a review of the complete game when it comes out.